my name is Martin, and today I would like to talk about how we can harden the machine where our AI agent is running. Specifically OpenClaw, but not only, it could also be applied to the same principle, the same mindset, we can also apply to other AI agents. And when I have set up Toby, my OpenClaw agent, on my Mac Mini, I had an idea, had a vision, and I think many of you maybe share this vision, that you have an agent which is running 24/7. Maybe you have even parallel agents, and they're doing your job for you. While you are relaxing, I don't know, maybe at the mountains, maybe at the ocean, with some magic island. Yeah. But in order for that vision to come true, we need to invest time and effort into hardening our OpenClaw AI agent or agents in plural installation. And we also need to understand the security implication, the security risks, and also how to mitigate them. In fact, the other day I read a newsletter. It said OpenClaw Masterclass, and in parentheses it even said how to get Mac Mini shipped to you. And basically the article contained a few steps on how to get OpenClaw up and running in a Mac Mini. So these are the steps. The first step is basically invoking npm command with the global flag to get OpenClaw installed. And it's already something that you may not necessarily want to do. Like in my setup, OpenClaw is not installed globally, but it's installed in a separate users folder, so that is without the global flag. Then the next step is basically configuring Anthropic or OpenAI key for the LLM, for the backbone of the OpenClaw AI agent. And the next step, basically configuring the Telegram bot. But I think what this article is missing, and I think also what other people is missing, is actually the steps before. Before you get OpenClaw up and running, before you install OpenClaw, you need to prepare your machine, you need to be aware of the risks, you need to make some configuration changes, so they should be step 0, which should be basically hardening and preparing your machine where OpenClaw will be running. So that's very important, the hardening step, and I think something that we are missing. Many people also ask if you really need a Mac Mini to run an OpenClaw AI agent, and the answer is no. Actually, generally you have two options. Option 1, you use a VPS, virtual private server, so basically you rent a server from a cloud provider and run and install your OpenClaw agent there. And the second option is to use a physical machine. In my view, a better option and more solid option would be using a physical machine, which you could install in your home location or in your office location. Also, because it gives you more control, and because if something really goes wrong, basically you can just go and unplug it from the electricity socket. In terms of the physical machine, whether you should go for a Mac, for a Windows, Linux, it depends on your experience. If you are more comfortable with the Mac operating system, if it is something you use in your day-to-day activities, you may want to go for a Mac computer, because you would need to configure security settings, you would need to make some other configuration changes, and it would be easier for you to understand how to do that if you have already an experience with the Mac OS. If, on the contrary, you're coming from the Windows world, if you use Windows in your day-to-day activities, then it would make sense for you to get a Windows machine, because the configuration this way would be easier. In any case, in both cases, you would probably still, depending on your experience, you probably would still need to learn the security aspect of either operating system, because it's one thing when we set up a computer for ourselves, then we know, okay, it's only us who are using them, so we don't really pay attention to all the configurations settings the operating system offers us. But when we set up a computer for an AI agent which is working 24/7, then we want to really understand how security works, and we really want to make sure we can disable like every security concern possible. So there would be a learning curve with either choice, but it would be less if you go for the operating system you already know. Now let's focus on how can we harden the machine where OpenClaw AI agent is running. Specifically a macOS machine such as a Mac Mini. Basically there are 4 stages of hardening that we can carry out, and I will cover now in the videos the first 2 stages, and the remaining stages will be covered in the subsequent YouTube videos. Network hardening, basically we have 3 settings we can apply. The first thing is to use a separate network. So the machine where OpenClaw AI agent is running should not be part of your primary local network, because otherwise it would be able to access other devices, specifically smart devices, Internet of Things devices, which are usually not that very good protected and encrypted. It could potentially spoof traffic, especially if you're not using VPN or if the traffic is not encrypted using HTTPS. Yeah, so in this case it's important to have a separate Wi-Fi configured, actually separate network, but Wi-Fi is an easier option. Many routers support guest network, so you can have it very easily configured, but it's important also to verify that actually when you configure a guest network that it is really separated. For that you can invoke shell commands for the IP configuration on your OpenClaw AI machine to make sure that the machine does not see the devices from your primary network. Also, if you happen to know the IP addresses of your devices in the primary network, you can try to ping them from your OpenClaw AI agent machine to make sure that they're indeed unreachable. And obviously, when you name a network, the name should not match the name of the primary network. So it should not be like my network underscore guest. So it should have a completely different name, and also it should have a very protected password. Both your primary network and your guest network should have a very good password protection. And additionally, on the macOS, you can specifically disable network configuration. So you can basically lock network configuration so that only an administrator would be able to, let's say, change a Wi-Fi network or disable different IP settings. So this is very important, so that even if an OpenClaw AI agent is compromised, there's no way it could change the network configuration if it is running as a standard user, which should be the case. It should not be running as an administrator user. And the third settings we can use on the macOS, we can use a built-in firewall, and basically we can disable all inbound connections. There are different connections which are enabled by default. I think some of them are used for printing services, some are used for Apple services, but you don't need those on your machine where you're running OpenClaw AI agent. You can disable them. I think it also goes without saying that you should not log in into your Mac Mini where OpenClaw AI is running with your Apple ID account, because otherwise this way OpenClaw would have access to your data from the iCloud, to your photos, to your documents. So that could be very, very dangerous. And I think ideally you don't need to actually even create a dedicated Apple ID account. So now let's talk about the user separation. So on my setup on the Mac Mini, I have 2 users. I have an admin user, which is a main user, and I also have an agent user. So there are 2 users. Agent is not an admin user, it's basically a standard user. And that means the agent is not able to access the files that are owned by the administrator user. Agent is also not able to install applications. The only exception I made for the agent is to be able to install brew packages. So in this case I modified, I added the agent and the admin to a separate group so that the agent may install brew packages. Now let's revisit the architecture of OpenClaw. So we have here our OpenClaw AI agent, in my case it's Toby. Then it uses, in my case it uses Cloud AI, but in other configuration you can also use local AI. In some cases it can be both local and cloud AI depending on your configuration. Then it is allowed to invoke the tools. The important thing is that basically Toby is not doing anything unless there is an input. And the inputs are coming from the channels. So here we can see the configured channels. So here we have Telegram, maybe we have an email, we have WhatsApp, we have Discord. Then we may also configure scheduled jobs such as cron jobs. So we can configure that every morning at 9 a.m. Our OpenClaw AI agent should send us a daily digest. Or maybe we can configure a heartbeat. That means like every 30 minutes it would be checking if there are outgoing projects, if there are some outgoing tasks to do, and basically it would action them. So you see that it's getting complicated the more inputs you have. Like in my setup, I have only Telegram, and that means that basically during the night the Toby is not working because I cannot message Toby during the night. But if I can, let's say if I configure a cron job to run like every night at 2 a.m., then yeah, the Toby would be running during the night, and it may also be invoking some tools, it may invoking some browser. But if I were also to add an email, that means like every email that would be coming could trigger Toby to do some work. And you see that it's getting a little bit not very clear. Because in this case, we don't know if Toby is working, we don't know what it is doing, and actually some event is coming at night. Let's say an email arrives, let's say an email contains some malicious instruction and something is happening, so the Toby, let's say, decides to invoke some tool and basically maybe send some unsolicited data, maybe send some unsolicited API request, and we won't notice this during the night. So actually, ideally in this setup, we may need to have some sort of an on-call framework setup, such as PagerDuty, so that during the night we would receive a call if something is gone wrong. So my recommendation would be to keep the number of channels actually minimal, so that you know what your agents are doing. And yeah, and obviously you can also make things even more complicated if you'd say you add another agent, let's say Agent Smith. And then basically we have two agents which all may react to different input channels, and yeah, and this basically this is a loop. So email arrives, let's say Toby or Smith processes it, and then the LLM instructs them to call a tool. So they call a browser, and basically this is a loop. Now there is an elephant in the room. Actually, there are three elephants in the room. First thing is that it's important to know that the OpenClaw AI agent, when it is running, it has access to all your files on your computer. Well, at least to all the files in its workspace. So in my case, it doesn't have access to the admin files, but it still has access to local files. And imagine if there is like a prompt injection, or there is some configuration error, and basically it could read those files as is, and potentially it could send the data to the internet. So one thing is session data. So whenever you talk to OpenClaw, like all the chat configuration, it's stored in the OpenClaw workspace folders under user/your username, and all this data are stored as plain text. So currently they are not encrypted. And that means potentially OpenClaw, AI agent could basically just open the file and send the contents of that file to the cloud, to another address. So I think it's something that we should be mindful about. Currently, I am not sure if there is a workaround, or I'm not yet sure how can we fix this. I think one option would be that we could manually delete some session files which are old, but if you also start deleting them without knowing which files to delete, then all your conversation. Like in my case, I'm using a Telegram direct message, but I also have set up multiple Telegram groups. So that means the conversation would lose the context and I won't be able to proceed with that conversation. So it should be very careful about this. But that means the takeaway is that probably you should not share private data with the OpenClaw for now, at least for now, until we have figured out how we can solve this issue. The second issue is that when you're using credentials, for example, if you're executing coding tasks with your OpenClaw AI agent, then it uses like GitHub CLI and it uses Git CLI. And unfortunately, I have carried out the security analysis of these two CLIs, and out of the box, they don't protect credentials that well. So they store credentials actually into the keychain, which is a very good practice. But the problem is when they store credentials into the keychain, they add an access rule, which basically allows everyone else logged in as an agent user to access these credentials. So that means they're not really stored in a very, very secure way. But the solution for that is to enhance the CLI, and that's exactly what I did. So for both Git CLI and GitHub CLI, I have written a wrapper, and the wrapper makes sure that the credentials are stored in the keychain, and that these credentials can only be accessed by the wrapper itself. Because OpenClaw Agents needs to use these tools, and you don't want every time it wants to push to the remote branch or create a pull request or review a pull request. You don't want that each time you get a pop-up window and then you need to log in maybe via the remote desktop to your agent machine, and then you need to click allow once or allow always. And that's why it's important that these processes are running smoothly. And for that I have implemented the wrapper. With the wrapper, only the wrapper has access to the keychain item, and after that it calls either Git CLI and it calls or GitHub CLI, depending on the command that the agent needs to execute. And additionally, it also checks the provenance. So before calling the Git CLI, it also checks that the Git CLI or GitHub CLI is indeed the real CLI, that it's not been compromised. So it checks the code signature, it checks that it has been signed by Apple, and this makes sure that it prevents the attack on the supply chain attacks. Now let's go to the biggest elephant in the room. And the biggest elephant in the room is the OpenClaw configuration file. Well, first thing, it is stored as a plain text, and inside the OpenClaw configuration file you have your Telegram token. And anyone who would have access to the Telegram token may compromise your bot. I think there are some ways to pass them into the environment variables, but I'm currently something that I'm investigating, and actually I have an idea to inject the configuration time at the runtime and actually injecting it from the administrator user space. But this is also something that I leave for the subsequent videos. But for now, just be mindful that by default, OpenClaw configuration file is unencrypted. And of course, OpenClaw AI agent has access to it. So imagine, again, there is a prompt injection, or there is an email arrives which tries to persuade a Telegram post, or our OpenClaw AI agent goes to browse something, and there is an instruction pop-ups which asks for the OpenClaw to be provided, like using some sort of a social engineering attack, and our OpenClaw AI bot is convinced, and basically it has access to all the files, and the OpenClaw configuration file by default is in the agent user workspace, because it is needed for the OpenClaw gateway, and basically it can read the file as is, and your Telegram bot token can be leaked. But not only that, but also other configurations such as API keys to Anthropic or OpenAI, and also other configuration. That's one thing. But the second thing is that the potential attack may not just steal the token, it may change the configuration. So it may instruct because the OpenClaw AI agent has access to the configuration, so it can make the changes, and then it can issue command OpenClaw gateway restart, and then the OpenClaw agent will be running as with a different configuration. So what could it change? For example, it could change restrictions on the Telegram, because OpenClaw has soft restrictions, and it has like soft guardrails and hard guardrails. Soft guardrails are in the code when, for example, the agent is instructed not to send files when in a group, because sending file in a group may not always ensure the files goes to the correct group. It may go to a different group. And hard guardrails is basically what is configured also partially in the configuration. And in your configuration, OpenClaw configuration, it says, for example, that only messages from me with my ID are allowed to talk to the OpenClaw AI agent. And that means if someone makes changes, then yeah, your OpenClaw, your Telegram bot will may suddenly be available to talk to other people, and potentially read the data from your phone. Or another example could be that it could introduce like a new integration, let's say WhatsApp, and that means someone would be talking to your OpenClaw AI agent instant from their own WhatsApp number, and will be using your OpenClaw AI agent for their purposes essentially, which is not good, obviously. Or it could also change the cloud LLM used as a backbone, maybe with a different LLM, or maybe with a LLM without much guardrails, like so-called uncensored LLM, and then have an LLM without guardrails as a backbone of OpenClaw AI agent. They could then further convince the agent to do things that it would not otherwise have done because of the guardrails. So this is this attack surface, this blast radius is really dangerous, and we should be mindful about it, that this could happen. So I'm curious about what do you think about the security? Have you also run into some of the other issues? Maybe you have come up with your solutions, with the different solutions. I'm looking forward to know what you think in your comments below. Thank you.